Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Monday, July 28th, 2025. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. In today's episode, we'll get the lowdown on another big summer box office weekend from Rebecca Rubin. And Michael Schneider breaks down 4 days of Comic-Con for us. Before we get to that, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. 3 power players have teamed to launch First Light Storyhouse. This is an effort to amplify Asian voices worldwide through TV and film. The initiative is founded by Mickey Lee, leader of CJE&M, Janet Yang, who is a producer and president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, and Dominic Ng, who is CEO of East West Bank. The goal is to support authentic Asian and Asian American stories and introduce them to global audiences. Amazon MGM Studios has set its first German-language theatrical film release in Germany. Der Tiger, from director Dennis Gansel, will go into theaters September 18th before bowing on Prime Video. MSNBC is bringing its fan event back to New York City. MSNBC Live, This Is Who We Are, will be held at New York's Hammerstein Ballroom on October 11th. That's right around the time MSNBC is expected to formally begin its new chapter as the channel separates from NBC Universal. Now we turn to conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in show business. If it's Monday, it means we're talking box office with Rebecca Rubin, Variety's Century of the Turnstiles. It was a big weekend for Marvel, which got the Fantastic Four First Steps off to a good start. Rebecca, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Another big summer weekend, the Fantastic Four First Steps. From your headline, it sounds like those first steps were pretty well received all around. How did this movie perform?
Yeah, Fantastic Four First Steps opened to $118 million domestically, and that was enough to be the 4th best opening weekend of the year. But kind of more importantly for Marvel, it was the studio's first movie to open to above $100 million in 2025. And they've had a bit of a rocky go. And so it's been encouraging for them.
People showed up. They wanted to see. I am such a Vanessa Kirby fan. I'm going to give her outsized credit. What do the early numbers tell you about who turned out to see this movie?
It was overwhelmingly male. About 68% of opening weekend audiences were men. And that was a little surprising to me, not because it's surprising that men like to see superhero movies, because that is really the target demographic. But if you've seen Fantastic Four, especially like you mentioned, Vanessa Kirby's character and storyline is very female-centric. And she's pregnant, and I don't think Marvel's had a pregnant superhero before. And so I am curious if in the coming weeks it'll start to over-index a little more with females, because I'm sure there will be people who resonate a lot with her character. And then something else that was notable was that nearly 50% of ticket sales were coming from premium large formats, which means that when people did go to see it, they really wanted to see it on the biggest and the brightest screens. And that has definitely been a trend that has been increasing since the pandemic. When audiences want to leave the house, they are really over-indexing on IMAX, Dolby, 4DX, just these screens that they really can't replicate in the home.
IMAX has been around for a long time, but they really seem to be part of the conversation now every weekend like they haven't been before.
Yeah, it almost feels like it's become part of the marketing campaign for a lot of these big films, and Fantastic Four is one of them that uses IMAX cameras, and so it's almost become a selling point. And of course, for theater owners and studios, those tickets are more expensive, and so they are more than happy for people to shell out for that.
Rebecca, as we spoke a couple weeks ago about, Marvel had a lot riding on this, both to have good critical reception, have the fans embrace this and like it, and of course, have people show up and go through the turnstiles. They appear to have both of those because the reviews have been very strong. And these are new faces coming into the MCU.
It's one of Marvel's first real successful attempts in post-pandemic times to spotlight newer heroes. And of course, Fantastic Four have been on the big screen before. Most of those films were not particularly embraced by critics or audiences, but this is the first time they're part of Marvel Cinematic Universe. They haven't been a part of any Avengers stories or anything like that. And the movies that have really worked for Marvel post-pandemic have been the real heavy hitters like Spider-Man No Way Home, Deadpool and Wolverine, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, just sequels to some of their biggest properties. But the ones that haven't been as successful are Thunderbolts, Eternals, the Marvels, just characters that people were not as familiar with.
Another question I know that you were looking at going into this weekend was there room enough in this town for 2 superhero movies? And would Superman hang in there in weekend 3 with the Fantastic Four arriving? How did that play out?
Yeah, it was a big question of whether or not 2 superhero movies would be able to succeed in the month of July. And a lot of people thought that was risky because many comic book adaptations have not been doing well. There was a time that superhero movies could truly do no wrong at the box office. It didn't really matter what the reviews said. Everyone went out to go see them. And that is not the time we are living in. And so to have them so close together, there was genuine and valid concern. Will people see both? And I think the answer this weekend is they will see both because Superman had a debut above 100 million and has continued to do well into its second and third weekends. And now we have Fantastic Four First Steps also having a very sizable opening weekend. And I think it's sort of proving that it's not necessarily superhero fatigue. I think it's more bad movie fatigue. And when audiences want to see the movie, they are willing actually to go see both.
Let me ask you regarding the large screen, the premium screens, are there enough of those theaters so that Superman and Fantastic Four could have a decent distribution in these theaters? Or is it the kind of case that whatever the new movie is coming in kind of crowds out anything else that might be holding on?
Definitely the latter of what you said. The new movie tends to take up all the oxygen, and it's definitely something that these distribution chiefs at studios are duking it out. They want their film on the largest number of premium large formats they can get. And so I think that's why we saw this weekend Superman, although it's holding on decently well, it had a pretty big drop this weekend. It's been chugging along pretty well during the week, so it's made almost $300 million domestically, but a 58% drop is pretty notable, and probably because it lost so many of its premium large formats that went to Fantastic Four.
In general, how has midweek business been this summer?
It seems it's definitely film dependent. Something like Superman has had pretty strong week-to-week holds, and I think that definitely speaks to just the strong word of mouth. People are talking about it, really enjoying it on all audience, all family film. But the box office right now is about 12 to 13% ahead of last year. The top 4 movies this weekend were Fantastic Four, Superman, Jurassic World Rebirth, and F1. And those are all big properties that have gotten people talking. And interestingly, all of those movies actually crossed pretty notable box office milestones this weekend. Superman and F1 both crossed $500 million globally, and then Jurassic World Rebirth crossed $700 million globally. And while there's only been one movie this year to cross the $1 billion mark, that's Lilo and Stitch, it's a good indication that at least some movies are getting close and hitting at least the $500 million mark.
Certainly this beats the alternative. Next up, TV editor Michael Schneider dishes about the buzz, the biz, and of course the cosplay that was on display this past weekend at San Diego Comic-Con. Mike is one of the kings of Comic-Con, doing no less than 3 big panels at the 4-day event.
Welcome to the return, the long-awaited return of Phineas and Ferb. We last celebrated the end of Phineas and Ferb here at Comic-Con in 2015. Who here was there at that finale panel? I saw some of you.
Michael Schneider, just back from San Diego and the wilds of Comic-Con. 4 busy days. What stands out to you now?
Yeah, I was cosplaying as a frazzled and now exhausted journalist, and you can tell my costume is off. The sweat is still dripping from my brow.
That just makes it authentic.
It was very authentic. It was a fun Comic-Con. It was a crowded Comic-Con. It was not a newsy Comic-Con. There wasn't a lot coming out of it. I think that's a sign of the times and what the studios are now investing in, and it's not necessarily in big events. That being said, there was some amazing, fun activations from especially Disney and NBC Universal and a couple other studios, and some great panels, but nothing that was big Hall H worthy as there have been in years past.
Probably the closest from my vantage point, very far away, was when George Lucas himself, Yoda, appeared at the convention to talk up something that is near and dear to him, his upcoming museum.
He had actually never made it down to San Diego Comic-Con before, and it took his own museum to bring him down there. So that rounded things up. But Hall H, which normally is busy on Sunday with Marvel panels, what have you, that was the only panel on the final day of Comic-Con.
Of course, journalists down there are looking for headlines, but for fans, you said the crowd was biggest as you've seen since the pandemic. Were the fans happy despite the lack of headline news?
You could tell more people were in costume this year. I brought along my sons, and they definitely noticed that as well. And there were a lot of fun events, including things that didn't require a pass. So if you didn't have a ticket into Comic-Con, you could still go to Crunchyroll, had a big 2-day concert event. They had all these activations all throughout downtown San Diego. So thankfully, one of the sponsors with a big pop-up this year was Old Spice, hopefully passing out deodorant.
Very helpful in close quarters like that. There was one that was quite topical, and you were there for the whole thing. Mike, tell us about the South Park panel that was probably the buzziest thing of the week.
Yeah, the South Park panel, which also, to be fair, included Mike Judge talking about Beavis and Butthead, and also Andy Samberg talking about his show Digimon. But everyone was in Hall H on Thursday night to see what Trey and Matt would say, especially after that episode aired on Wednesday, the South Park season premiere that the shot heard round the White House. And the boys, Matt and Trey, they didn't say much. Of course, as a journalist, I wanted them to just burn the place down. They didn't do that. They were very subtle, but they did refer to a few things about some of the depictions of President Trump in that episode, including the fight that they had with Comedy Central over the depiction of his penis in the episode. So we got some good information, enough that was one of our leading stories on the website throughout the weekend at Variety.com.
In addition to royally aggravating the president, they also struck a very big and groundbreaking deal. Were there any indications that they have just set a deal with Paramount, which is in the throes of a transition to a new owner, but they've just set a deal for 50 new episodes and expanded streaming rights? Did they make any reference to that?
No, they didn't. And that was originally why we were excited to go to that panel before that episode aired, because we thought, well, they were sort of battling Skydance. As you know, they were not happy with Jeff Shell and Skydance because they had a agreement they had an agreement in word with Paramount for a new deal. Skydance came in and wanted to renegotiate it. They were not happy. But then by the time Comic-Con came, they were about $1.5 billion richer. So I think they were happy that evening when they approached the stage at Comic-Con.
Mike, you are a highly in-demand moderator, and you always get some great slots at Comic-Con. This year, you did 3 big, high-profile panels. Let's start with King of the Hill, the return of this beloved former Fox animated family comedy that kind of broke all the rules of animated, even for adult animation.
There's a lot of anticipation. I think people really still love this show. There's a huge activation outside the convention center for King of the Hill as well. And that line just snaked down the marina. They aired an episode, first time people had seen it. And I really think fans of the original King of the Hill are going to be really impressed with what they've done with this show. And we had a great conversation, a lot of fun, and the crowd was just overwhelmed.
This show brought a Texas sensibility to skewering American culture, and that did not always hew to the more, conventional wisdom in Hollywood or New York.
they do a good job of threading that needle, very much like South Park in a way, in that, you can come to the show from any different political viewpoint, and maybe you're watching and thinking that, well, they're satirizing that, and other people may be looking at how they're satirizing something else.
Speaking of shows coming back, another panel you did was Phineas and Ferb. I
Yeah.
still love that theme song. Tell me, what was it like to get back with Swampy and Dan and that gang?
Well, this one was really special because I did the farewell panel for Phineas and Ferb back in 2015 there at Comic-Con. So in some ways, we've come full circle. And to be back 10 years later after saying goodbye to Phineas and Ferb and welcoming them back. And again, this is a show that hasn't missed a beat. If anything, it's become even more perhaps geared towards the grown-ups watching. I think they appreciate the fact that most of the fans who enjoyed Phineas and Ferb back in the late 2000s are now adults or teenagers. Maybe they have kids of their own. So some of the humor is even more slightly subversive, but also, really still reaches young people as well.
Tell me about the third panel you hosted down there.
The third panel had a chance to talk to a bunch of producers from some of the Sony dramas, including Ron Moore, talking a lot about the franchises because, they've really turned Outlander into a franchise with the new show Blood of My Blood. For All Mankind, which is one of my personal favorite shows, has a spinoff coming up called Star City. The Boys, of course, has turned into quite a franchise that was represented on the panel.
Two last quick questions for you, Comic-Con. Number one, Alien Earth, a big project for FX. I know they had some activations down there. Did you sense any organic buzz for it from fans?
Yeah, I definitely did. Partly they did a good job of plastering the side of a hotel with the big imagery from Alien Earth. There was a huge activation, like you mentioned, long lines, 18 plus, so it was definitely a scary activation. But yeah, so I think people are primed and ready for that.
That's a big launch coming up for all of Disney here in a couple of weeks. And then, of course, Comic-Con is a kind of a weather vane for the genre world. Was there anything that stood out to you in the cosplay? What impressed you?
I would say my favorite costume was I was walking down the street and along comes a man carrying some balloons, wearing a blue turtleneck, pants, big bushy mustache. It was Milchick from Severance. Whoever was cosplaying as Milchick did such a fantastic job, down to the balloons with Adam Scott's face on it. And it was brilliant. Saw a lot of Severance costumes, a lot of great ones, but that one really stood out.
Mike, thank you so much for your labors in San Diego and for being in demand for those panels. It's a testament to you.
Yeah, I'm glad I got that free Old Spice.
As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. It's going to be a busy week for earnings. Spotify and Electronic Arts report on Tuesday, Meta and Microsoft report on Wednesday, and Thursday brings Comcast, Amazon, and Apple, among others. We're also on 24/7 Paramount Skydance Media Watch. That merger is heading toward the finish line after overcoming some truly unbelievable obstacles. But it ain't over till it's over. We're keeping watch at Variety.com. Coming up on Friday, Variety and CJE&M are hosting an invite-only gathering for industry insiders tied to the KCON Korean Culture Fan event that unfolds this weekend in downtown LA. Before we go, congrats to Benjamin Kramer. He's been named president of U.S. distribution for Black Bear, the indie studio backed by Teddy Schwartzman. Kramer was formerly co-head of CAA Media Finance. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Rebecca Rubin and Michael Schneider. It was edited by Aaron Greenwald. Sticks, Nicks, Hick, Picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice, and please tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Variety.